Well, we're gonna go ahead and get started since, and if any people come in, then they can join us. And then Mo is recording this so that we can add it to, is it Facebook? Or?
YouTube.
YouTube, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll send that information out too. So this is Madi. She's from West Cobb Funeral Home, and she has agreed to come and share a presentation, PowerPoint presentation. The goal of this meeting, guys, is not for you to sign up with any funeral home or to do anything like that. It's just that I knew a lot of people at this funeral home, so I knew that I can call them and see if we can work this out. The goal is to just inform you of details so that you can make a better decision when it comes time where you have to make these decisions. And so I put some questions together, and she has a copy of those. And I'm not saying that we're going to have answers to all these questions, and I certainly don't expect you to stand here and take a quiz.
I certainly could, though.
But so that's we're trying to bring topics of interest into our community that we feel like senior adults need. And so you're the first.
Oh,
so this
honored.
You're the first one we've had, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, first of the series. Well, I am super grateful that, again, Miss Val gave me the phone call to come and speak with you all, because I know that funerals and pre-planning and cremation is not the easiest topic to discuss nor think about. And so I always like to start these presentations with a little bit of trivia to test your knowledge, and then we'll kind of get into it after that.
Okay.
What's the password?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, that's it.
Perfect. Welcome. All right, so our first question is a general trivia question. What landmark restaurant sits at the corner of Highway 20 and US 41 in Marietta? The Big Chicken! That's right, that's an easy one. That was built back in 1956 by a Georgia Tech graduate.
Oh, wow.
So a fun little fact there. And then next, who holds the record for the world's most expensive funeral? We have Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Queen Elizabeth, or John F. Kennedy.
Queen
Queen, that's correct.
Oops.
Queen Elizabeth. So Princess Diana held the record at $16.2 million. And then the Queen, who just passed away a couple years ago, hers was over $204 million.
Wow.
You can believe that.
Wow.
And then next, what celebrity saw their funeral tickets scalped for more than $10,000? We have Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Prince, or John Lennon.
See the Prince or Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
I was going to say, what is this? Guess right, it's Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Good job. So there's over 17,000 people that attended his funeral service, and he had several different musical performances. Stevie Wonder performed Mariah Carey, Usher, so it was quite the musical celebration of life. It was appropriate for him.
Oh, wow.
And then next, who owns the plot next to Marilyn Monroe? We have Joe DiMaggio, Madonna, Hugh Hefner, or John F. Kennedy.
DiMaggio.
Actually, not DiMaggio, which is obviously makes no sense, but it's not him. Any other guesses?
Hefner?
It's Hefner. It's Hugh Hefner. So he purchased the space next to Marilyn back in 1995 for $75,000, and it's out there in LA.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Welcome. And then this last one, do we have any veterans in the room?
Up here.
Any better?
Yeah.
Oh, we have
Mike's a veteran.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And so for a veteran service, how many stars should be visible on a properly folded flag?
8.
Ooh.
Not 8.
12.
Not 12, lower.
6.
Lower, it's actually 4.
You get it eventually.
You got it eventually. But it's supposed to represent each branch of the military, minus the
I did
Coast
not know
Guard.
that.
So fun fact you can pass along. I know, the trivia. So here's our agenda today. We like to keep these brief but informative, so it'll be about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for Q&A, and we can walk through those questions too if I haven't answered any of those that you like. But I'll do a little introduction into the funeral home and just how I got into the industry. I get asked that a lot, just being so young. And then we'll walk through some of the common reasons why people choose to plan ahead of time, what that actually looks like, and how you can customize a plan as well. And again, just some things to think through. Just like Ms. Val said, this is purely informative, so if you have a question, write it down, and again, we can get to that at the end of the presentation. And so, by raise of hands, how many of y'all are familiar with West Cobb Funeral Home? So only a few of us. So we're about, I think it's about a 20-minute drive here. But we're over in Marietta at the intersection of Barrett Parkway and Mackland Road. There's a racetrack gas station right across the street from us. And we opened back in 1995. So it's been there for over 30 years, or I guess 30 years was this year. In 2025, we're still family owned and operated. And so Mr. David Roach is our owner. I always get asked, hello, welcome. I still see right here. I always get asked if I'm one of his daughters. Unfortunately, I'm not, but he has 2 daughters, and one is a year older and a year younger than me, so I'm right there in the mix. And they do just an absolutely fabulous job. And again, we're honored to be able to come out here. We're very, try to be very active, proactive in talking about pre-planning and educating our community, because it makes such a difference to be able to have things done ahead of time. And so moving right along right here, it's a picture of my family. And this updated picture is actually just got married a few months ago. So that was the wedding day, so fun. But my story begins with my grandparents right here. And so my grandpa was a World War II veteran. He lived out in Utah, and he had 5 children, my dad being one of the 5. And he had a conversation with my grandpa years and years and years ago. Kind of asked him what he wanted to do, as far as funerals. And my grandpa said that he wanted to be buried at the National Cemetery there and just have a simple church service. So that was very traditional. That was what everybody in our family had done before. So my dad didn't think much about it. It was just locked that away. But my grandpa, I guess, had tried to have conversations with my grandma, but my grandma didn't want to talk about it. So that conversation ended there. They didn't, obviously meet at the funeral home. He didn't write down any of this. And so fast forward years later, my aunt apparently had this other conversation with my grandpa, and he had decided to be cremated. That was what his wishes were. And again, that's not saying that cremation or burial, one's better than the other, but obviously very different wishes. And so when he did pass away a few years ago, unfortunately it was such a difficult time with all the children coming around and my dad being like, hey, he wants to be buried at the National Cemetery, church service, and then my aunt was like, whoa, no, he wants to be cremated. And then it's just like, what do you do in that situation? And so unfortunately there was a lot of hurt feelings, and obviously everyone was trying to do what's best for their dad. But again, with no plan in place, nothing written down, it was just a really difficult time and some contention, which I know is the last thing that he would have wanted, to be remembered for. And so it was there that I learned that pre-planning even existed. My grandma, seeing, the situation that her family went through, decided to go back to that funeral home. She sat down with someone. But sat down and just pre-planned absolutely everything. She picked out her casket, she picked out who was going to speak. At the funeral service, she had written down for me and my 3 brothers who don't sing to sing at her funeral, which we did. Don't know how good it was. But she just picked out and planned absolutely everything. And so when she did pass away, it was, again, just this night and day difference of having a plan in place, knowing, what funeral home that she wanted to use. Everything was paid for, and all that we had to do was just show up. And like I said, that was the first time that I even learned that that was possible. And I was just like, why doesn't everybody do this? We're all going to die at some point. And so again, I just commend y'all for being here, because I know it's not the easiest topic, but it just makes such a difference for your family and for those who will be left behind. And so the next slide here just again talks about the most common reasons that we hear at the funeral home as to why people plan ahead. And I'd love to have just a few volunteers just share, what's their most important reason why you would want to plan ahead of time.
So I lost my husband 6 years ago, and we never talked about it.
So that's exactly, like, I kind of knew what he wanted, but I chose cremation because I was living in Illinois and I had this weird feeling I wouldn't always be there. And then I moved back. So he got to come with me.
Right.
But it's like, didn't expect it. So I think pre-planning is really a great idea for that reason.
So you brought your husband to earn back with you, did you say? Or is he in Illinois?
He's my father.
I'm sorry.
She got to carry him with them.
No, I guess my question
Yeah.
for you though, because I know we talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
My question is that, but your plan is that you'll be buried together?
My plan
at
is
some
that
point?
when I get
But you have plans, yeah. But you're together.
that will be, I can't say where we're going to go.
Yeah.
No cremation, please.
Maybe too much information.
But yeah, I think it's really important.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I have tentative plans. I mean, I've got it written down. I mean, I have a notebook that I've kind of written things down, like for our daughter who is the administrator, who to call, this is what my husband wants, this is what I want, and this is where we're going to be buried and all that. But there's still a ton of information, I think, that all got to be filled in. And I'm hoping I'll get those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
I'll start by saying I was back in Indiana recently for a family thing, and of the 9 kids, I went to the cemetery and kind of sat there and talked to my parents for a little while. I talked to my kids, and what I'd kind of like is to be, I don't know if it's cremated or not, but put me in the ground and plant a tree, maybe in their backyard or something like that, and just somewhere where somebody might think about me after I'm done around, like damn leaves or something like that.
I was sharing with some ladies yesterday that we were up in Cades Cove one year, a few years ago, and we spread out a picnic lunch, and we were sitting there having lunch, and this elderly man was standing kind of at a distance from us and everything. Well, he stood there forever, because it took us forever to eat, and so we finally started cleaning up, and as we were cleaning up, I saw him start edging a little bit closer to us, and I discovered that there was this area where there was some shrubs planted, and there was a little tag on one of the bushes, and I'm guessing that's where his wife's ashes are. Because after we cleaned up, he just stood there, and we sat down and stayed for a long time. Just different.
It is. But there are so many options out there, which is again why it's so smart to be thinking about it ahead of time to, think through what it is that you want and, how you want your family to be able to remember you. And so we've covered a lot of these already, but just first and foremost, so those decisions that would otherwise burden family members later can all be handled now ahead of time. There's going to be no doubt about what the final disposition should include. Your spouse, your children aren't left to wonder if you really wanted burial or cremation. They'll be able to know that with a surety. And that just gives you peace of mind. The whole title of this presentation is Peace of Mind, because that's what we want to help you obtain here by being able to put a plan in place and have that emotional burden lifted from your loved ones. And then it also just ensures that all the funeral costs have been addressed, and I'll walk through that a little bit later, what that looks like. And then it allows your loved ones to have a more positive grieving experience. Obviously, it'll still be one of the hardest days when they lose you. But by having everything taken care of ahead of time, all that they have to do is make one phone call and show up, and that's it. And that is such a blessing. I see families day in and day out, of those who have a plan and those who don't, and it's a very stark difference. And so again, commend y'all for being here today. And so there's anywhere between 75 to 125 different items to all, gather this information right after you lose a loved one, which obviously is extremely overwhelming, and I just see so many families that are so underprepared to be able to answer all of these questions. And so we, as a funeral home, are like, how can we help families in this situation? And that's exactly why we created our Final Wishes organizer. And so that's what I do with families each and every day is I sit down with people and we fill out this organizer together. And in this organizer, I gather all the vital statistics that are needed from the funeral home. It's everything needed to file for a death certificate. So it goes over your name, date of birth, your occupation, your social security number, your father's name, your mother's maiden name. All very easy questions for you to answer. Your spouse normally knows those answers too. But when it comes to the children, it's like, what's grandma's maiden name? And then especially just under that emotional distress, those can be very challenging questions to answer. Where was mom born? And so anyway, so we love to gather all the vital statistics that are needed at that time, and then any special instructions that you may have as well. We love to be able to capture that and document that ahead of time too. And so that could look like, again, if you want burial or cremation, if you're wanting a viewing for the, open to the public, or you want a closed casket, or maybe you don't want a viewing at all and you want, those to come see you alive to come see you now. I hear all different answers with that one. But again, if you want a service, we recommend some sort of service or gathering, whether that's at the funeral home, at your church, whether you want your family just to go out and eat in your memory, go on some vacation, I've heard. So whatever that looks like, just some sort of gathering to be able to plan for your family at that time. And then funeral service request, again, just thinking through who you'd want to, if you are religious, who you want to officiate your service, if there's a certain pastor, preacher. And then we always kind of like to ask a backup pastor or preacher too, if something were to happen to the first. What songs do you want sung or played at your funeral? Do you want live music or do you want just recorded music? Do you have favorite scripture verses, that you want read at the service? Do you have a favorite poem, a favorite secret recipe you want to send out? And all of these little details we're able to walk through and kind of just document, again, for your family. And then any military record as well. So we can walk through all the veterans burial benefits, which are all found up at the Georgia National Cemetery or any national cemetery. And all of the cemetery portion is paid for by the VA. So you can pass that along to your veterans.
I just learned, we just recently did it, that you have to get pre-approved. So in other words, you have to fill out a lot of documents through the VA and send them in. The VA has to approve you to be buried in a national cemetery before you die, and that's where you say you want to go. Is that?
That does have to happen. You can do it ahead of time, or the funeral home can do that at the time of death. As well.
We just faster than we can, probably.
Yes, when you do it ahead of time, it takes a very good couple of months.
It can take a long time. That's why I was worried about it. I thought if it's going to take that long, then
yes. But at the time of need, there's obviously a different process. So the funeral home, we do that for families. But it's a great thing if you question. So the requirements to be buried up at the National Cemetery is if you served for at least 2 years and you're honorably discharged. If you have some questions about, I served for 18 months or something like that, that's when I would recommend filling out the pre-need eligibility so you can, make sure that you're approved or not. But that's also for the veterans and the veteran spouses as well. Both can be buried up at the National Cemetery. So it's great savings there. And then any special instructions as well, where it's cremation. So we do have our own crematory at the funeral home. And so that sets us apart as well. And so we do all of our cremations in-house. And again, there are several options with cremation. So you could obviously do just the cremation itself, or if you want, a memorial service with the cremation, we can help with that. Or if you want a full viewing and service before the cremation takes place, that's an option as well. A lot of people don't know that, you can have a more traditional funeral with cremation.
What's the turnaround time of cremation? Like a lot of people have a funeral in 3 to 5 days.
I'd say it's normally about a week time. If there's a need for it to happen immediately, we can. But I feel like for most people, when they come and sit down with one of our funeral directors and then they plan the service, I feel like it's normally about a week out. But obviously we can do the cremation. We just have what's called a cremation authorization form that has to be signed by the legal next of kin before we can do the cremation. And so that's obviously would fall to your surviving spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, or if your spouse has passed already, it would fall to your children. And all children would need to sign off on that cremation authorization form. They don't have to be in state. We can email it out, and they can do DocuSign. But there is that, if you foresee there being any issues with your children, or if you maybe don't have children and you're gonna list your trusted friend as the legal person in charge, there's what's called a Georgia Advanced Healthcare Directive that you can fill out. I recommend that. And that's free to get. You can get it online, or you can come talk to me afterwards and get you a copy. But there you're able to designate who you want that person to be able to sign off on the cremation. Or if you want just one of your children to be in charge. Any questions with that? All right, well that's, like I said, really where you're able to do all the customization. And if you're not sure if you want burial or cremation, I'm happy to sit through and kind of just walk through the different options with you. Because a lot of the times you just don't even know what questions to be asking until you sit down and start thinking about this.
I do have a question. That pamphlet or that booklet of all the information, is that something that we can get from you?
So it's something that I just sit down and meet with families.
Okay.
Yep. There's no cost associated with it though. So we gather the vital statistics, and then I'd walk through a cost estimate. So that's probably one of the most common questions I get too is, how much is this all going to cost? Yeah. And for each and every one of you, that's going to be a different cost because you'll pick out something different, a different urn, a different casket, different flowers, and all the different things that go into a funeral or a memorial service that would look a little bit different.
I have a question that's not for me, but for any veterans' wives that are here. My mother was a World War II widow, and my father was buried in a national cemetery in Los Angeles, and she never remarried. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but and she had gone to a funeral home, had everything all planned. All I had to do was call them, and we had one hang up. We needed to have a copy of her marriage certificate to prove she was his widow. And that enabled her to be buried in the same tomb on top of him. Is it the same here?
It is the same.
Bury them together?
Yes, ma'am. Yep, that's just one.
That is just so neat.
It
Like
is.
up here at the Georgia National, Tim will be buried in front of the headstone, and I will be buried behind it.
And you have
But they do it on top.
So
of
they
each
do
other,
it one
don't
on
they?
top of each other for the veteran and the spouse, but the veteran's information is listed on the front of the headstone, and then the spouse's information is listed on the back.
just make sure you have your proof of marriage.
Yes, they need your
Even though they paid
DD-214.
her a widow's pension for 50 years, she still needed that proof, and it was challenging to find that.
That can be hard.
It was very hard to find it, but we did.
Yeah,
Just in the
absolutely.
nick of time.
Yeah.
And there is a deadline.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So that's true. You need your DD-214 and a copy of the marriage certificate for your spouse.
I didn't know about the marriage certificate.
Yeah.
Gosh, we had to go way back and dig that up.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 1940-ish,
Yeah.
And we found it, but it wasn't easy. And she didn't know she had to have that, or she would have had it with everything else.
Perfect. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions? So moving along, this is our acute loss period, and I'll just briefly go over this. But this is, if you've experienced a loss, which I'm sure each and every one of you have, this is kind of the process that we go through. And at the center of there is begin healing, because that's really what we see our purpose as a funeral home is to help your family and friends be able to put this intentional plan in place for them to begin healing. And so obviously you're going to hear the news that you've lost your loved one. That happens, automatically, and we immediately begin picking up the phone and reaching out to, our siblings, our spouse, our children, and to be able to share that news. That's just a natural process that we go through. And then the question on the other end is always, when is the service going to be? And that's just really code for just letting that person know that we want to be able to show up for them and for their family to be able to support. And so it's really hard when there's no service or gathering or anything, set up for the loved ones to be able to go attend. And so again, whether that's a formal service at the funeral home or church, or something informal at their favorite campground site or ballpark or something of the sort. We just recommend some sort of gathering, again, for family and friends to be able to come to and share in their condolences. And again, that just allows that time for family and friends to gather and connect, reflect on the life that was lost, and then we always, look internally inside as well, and just kind of reprioritize some things. And then able to obviously celebrate the life that was lost. And so again, whatever that sort of gathering, that service would look like for you, we just recommend so strongly to have some sort of something in place with that, wherever that may be. And then this slide here just talks about the pre-funding side of things. And again, this is all informational, and you can choose whichever funeral home that you'd like to. Obviously, we'd be honored if you, chose West Cobb. But I can talk to how it's set up at our funeral home. Every funeral home looks a little bit different. But ours, the first and foremost, probably why most people prepay ahead of time, is you are able to lock in today's cost. And a lot of people don't know that option exists, but obviously funerals, cremations go up each and every year, just like everything else. And so you are able to lock in today's cost. And then the funds are protected by an insurance provider. And so at the funeral home, we aren't legally allowed to hold on to any money until after we've completed the services. And so we're partnered with Funeral Directors Life, and that's for your protection if we're to ever go out of business or a tornado came through and wiped down the funeral home, your money is still safe and made available to you. And the policy is also completely transferable. And so I was just talking with Val earlier that a lot of you are transplants, not originally from this area, so maybe you'll move elsewhere. And this policy is completely transferable to any other funeral home as well. And then manageable payments. Obviously not everybody has just a large chunk of change just lying around all the time. And so when you're looking at it ahead of time, there's a lot more flexibility there. And then there is different payment plan options that I could walk through with you as well. And then you are protected while making payments. And so if something were to happen to you before it was paid off in full, then the remaining cost of the funeral is actually covered by our insurance company. So you're protected while making payments as well. So any questions with that? I know it's a brief overview.
I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, so there's manageable monthly payments. So say you're on a 10-year monthly payment plan option, and something happens to you 3 years down the road, the remaining cost of that funeral is actually going to be covered by our insurance company. So the family doesn't ever have to finish paying on that. So that's how it's set up. Any questions with that?
Yes, you say it's transferable.
Uh-huh.
A good reason to do it now is to lock in the price.
Right.
Yeah. Let's say a tornado does, come, and now we have to deal with a different funeral home. Do they have to honor the price for the type of service, or are they going to say, well, we have your money and that's great, and we can do your funeral, but it's $2,000 more than it was 5 years ago?
So legally, they're not going to be obligated to honor our locked-in prices, but I will say that most reputable funeral homes do.
Okay.
And so it's kind of just a good gauge of, again, you have that sheet of, what funeral home you're working with. I will say a lot of really good funeral homes, they honor those locked-in prices.
Okay.
That's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, and then this lastly is our out-of-area protection. I get questions on this all the time too. What happens if I pass away in Florida? And so that's what our out-of-area protection is. And this is something that we include in our pre-arrangements. And that is if you are to pass away 75 miles or more outside of the area here. So again, if you're in Florida, you're in California, you're on a cruise ship, you're over in Asia, and something happens to you, it covers all the costs and logistics to bring you back to the funeral home as well. And so there's that. I think that is it. And so next steps, again, we'll open it up to Q&A and we can kind of walk through any of those questions that I haven't answered. But if you'd like more specific information tailored to you personally, I'm happy to meet with you.
My parents bought a plot where the first was on the bottom and the second was on the top. And then they decided to be cremated. At first it was a full burial, no cremation. And since I'm not married, I asked the funeral home since they're cremated, there's plenty of room.
Right.
and could I be cremated in place with them? And they said no.
Aw.
Is that something that's by state?
That is by cemetery. So it's the cemetery's
Is it?
decision.
So two people can be kind of in the same plot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One of
Yeah, in
the
the same
other.
space.
I mean, as far as cremation, but what if one of your parents, or what if your mother passed away and she was buried and there's only one in there? Can somebody else be buried? Because that would mean they'd have to dig deeper, right?
Yeah, so again, when it comes to cemetery specific questions, it'll be working directly with that cemetery. They are their own entity. And so every cemetery has, different standards, different rules. I'd say a double interment is what that is called when there's two people in one space. That is pretty standard in the industry. But there's definitely, in that situation, it's like obviously there's space. So so again, that's a question for the cemetery.
But I guess they were cremated too?
Yeah, but they bought the plot
Yeah.
for caskets. And
Yeah.
then later, a
Right.
few years later, they decided to be cremated.
Right.
So there was
Oh.
space.
Right.
My
I know,
dad
I
always
must
said
have
the
read
first
that.
one to die will be buried face up, and the second one to
Yeah.
die will be buried face down. They can talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. He was a jokester.
Any general questions? I can kind of just look through this. And so transparency, I agree, that is huge when selecting a funeral home. And as far as costs and fees go, you can go to our website. It's just westcobbfuneralhome.com. And then all of our pricing is listed there for you. And so you can see all of our different burial and cremation options, what each package is. And then again, if you want a more specifically tailored cost estimate, I'd be happy to meet with you. And like I said, there's no cost with that. That's just a complimentary service that we offer.
Well, the next one is why are funerals so expensive? Because you hear so many people talk about funerals are so expensive anymore that a lot of people are just going to the cremation because they don't see the necessity of using all that money that they can leave their family when they can do a cremation for a fraction of the cost.
Right. I'd say a huge portion with that one is your cost of the casket versus the cost of an urn. An urn is going to be just a couple $100. A casket's a couple $1,000, so that's a big difference. And then with cremation, you obviously don't have to purchase cemetery. You can keep the urn yourself, or you can scatter the ashes as well. And so versus with burial, you do have to purchase cemetery. And with cemetery, there's the cost of the space. There's the cost of the opening and closing fee that the cemetery charges for them to dig the grave and cover that back up. There's a cost of a vault, which is what the casket or urn is buried into. It's that concrete grave liner. And then also the headstone or marker. And so, you have all of that cemetery expense on top of the funeral expense as well. And then a lot of the times with the traditional burial service, you will have an open casket, which is also would include embalming and cosmetics and all of that. Versus with, a simple cremation, that's also, that cost isn't there as well. So those are a few things of just why there's a big difference in the cost of burials and cremations. So I'd say the cemetery is the biggest part. Let's see.
Okay, talk to us about the eco-friendly burial service.
So there's there's what's called green burials, and that is for families that don't want any embalming done at all, and they kind of just want to go back to the earth naturally. And so there's a few green cemeteries. There's not any that are super close to this area. There's one out in Milton that is about 45 minutes to an hour away, and then there's also one in Conyers. And so with that,
That's where I'm going.
okay, are the green cemetery there?
Yeah, it's that monastery,
Mhm.
Honey Creek Woodlands.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is an option, and again, that's just going to be a very natural burial. There's no embalming done. You're wrapped in a shroud, so you're not in a traditional casket. But again, it's just kind of the idea is just to go back to the earth as naturally
And
as possible.
it's not your typical casket. It's just like what I saw online. It was like kind of like
A wicker
just
basket.
a basket or a wood, just a wood, old timey wood coffin.
Yeah. I mean, and even just a lot of the times people just want to be wrapped in a shroud too. So not even a casket in full, but just cloth. And then you can be cremated too, and that would obviously be an eco-friendly burial as well, if the biodegradable urn in that option.
I wanted to be scattered out there, but then I was reading that you still have to have a hole, and you can put the ashes free, fill the ashes in, but you can't scatter on their feet.
Okay, it's good to know. Like I said, every cemetery, they have their rules there. And then also if you wanted to be sent off into sea or scattered at sea, by law you're supposed to be 3 miles out into the ocean. But we do have different water burial urns that just completely disintegrate into the ocean or into a river. There's fresh water or salt water. And so a lot of families love that idea of being able to be sent off into the water. And then there's also, like this gentleman was talking about earlier about being buried and then have a tree planted on top of you. We have that option as well.
With a sign.
And remember that.
So that's another eco-friendly option. And there's several different trees that you can choose from too with that. Yes, ma'am.
Question, if you're going to be cremated, are you embalmed first, if it's like a week or something?
Only if you want a public viewing is
okay.
embalming required. We have a refrigerated area at the funeral home and that would hold loved ones.
So when my dad died, he's buried up there at the Georgia National Cemetery, but he wanted to be cremated. But we wanted to have the family be able to come in, but we were on a really tight schedule of how much time you can involve family and view before he had to be cremated. So, because we didn't want him embalmed, and we had to rent a casket for him for the showing, and then we turned right around and had him cremated.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions or questions from the list here that you want to cover?
Yeah, some of these you've already covered, so you're ready. Okay, what about is your staff, say for instance, one of us pass away and our spouse or our children have to call, is it a 24-hour service?
It's 24/7, 365 days a year, so someone will always be there to answer the phone call. I will cover this, they asked questions on this. So if someone does pass away at home, your first phone call will be to 911. The first responders will come out and they're the ones that do the pronouncement of the death, or if there's anything they can do, transportation to the hospital. And then afterwards is when the funeral home is called. So first phone call is to 911. And unless you're on hospice, under hospice care, then your first phone call is to hospice to notify, if someone's passed, and then they go out and do the pronouncement, and then the funeral home is called. Any questions with that process?
Yeah, this is a stupid question.
No dumb questions here.
Answered to already that I didn't click until you were standing there talking. So my plan for me, if my husband goes first, was to tell my kids, just take my credit card and pay for it, and then when you get the money out of the whatever, then pay off the card. But I guess they can't use my credit card if I'm dead, right? Or, isn't that right?
That's their name,
Or can they?
I mean, I feel like that's
Get a card in their name.
I have my card just
Just for that?
in both of their names, but they don't know it.
Oh,
Only when they get to use it.
okay, so my son is our executor, and we have him on our bank account. He could go get money out of the bank instead of using that.
Yeah, I was you're the one that was telling us if something happens and you die, don't call the bank ahead of time.
But he can sign on it. He can sign on
don't call the bank first.
I did it.
It's in his name.
And yeah, both of them are on it, but they don't know it. Only when I pass away, they'll get it.
So do you guys process life insurance policies?
Yep, so families can use life insurance policies that can't be used ahead of time. That'll be at the time of need. So unfortunately, we can't lock in the cost with a life insurance policy. but they can use that at the time of need. And it is good just to, you know, if you do have life insurance, if that's your plan, just to review it, because a lot of the times, unfortunately, what we see is that, you know, a child thinks that mom or dad had this life insurance policy, but they missed a payment or a few, and that policy is lapsed. So I always, you know, just double check, make sure it's in good standing. And then another thing to consider if you do, hello. If you do have to go into a nursing care facility, obviously nobody plans or wants to do that, but if you do end up going that route and need to get onto Medicaid, then what they do is what's called a Medicaid spend down, and they make you spend down all of your assets to, you know, it's a very small amount, and that includes life insurance policies. And so a lot of the times people think that they'll use their life insurance policy to pay for the funeral, but if you get in that situation, that money's gone. And so if you prepay with a funeral home, it's the one thing that the government recognizes that they can't touch, and it's what's called an irrevocable policy. So that's just also something to keep in mind as well. They're just differences of insurance policies.
You know what? There's another thing. I remember that there's, excuse me, you mentioned if somebody didn't make a payment on their premium. So there's some kind of Georgia law that if you're ill and you're the one who handles everything, and or you're the only person, and you don't make, excuse me, get rid of this frog. Anyway, if you are unable to make a payment because you're in a coma or really ill, or whatever the reason, like along those lines, the insurance company cannot cancel your policy for non-payment of premium when you're in that kind of shape. So that's something for people.
Is that something new, or did you say?
No.
Is it a law?
Apparently, yes. And I'm trying to think of who told me about it. That's a really important thing that most people don't know. So I guess you could call the insurance commissioner's office of the state of Georgia and find out for sure.
And somehow have to prove all that happened and everything. I'm sure it's a lot of
that is,
legwork with that.
Who told me that? And it was someone who was actually affected by that, but I can barely remember 3 weeks ago. So this was not recently.
Any other questions?
We have to, if we want to do the payment thing, we can just call you and set up an appointment.
Yeah, I'll stay after, so if you want to set up an appointment with me, you can, or I'll leave my cards out and you can just give me a phone call at the funeral home and we can set up a time to get together. I do home appointments, or you can come into the funeral home as well.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions?
We can take a field trip.
Yeah. Just rent a bus down to the funeral home. It is. It's nice to check out the facility too. If you've never been to the funeral home, it's absolutely gorgeous, and so it's nice to kind of just get a feel of the staff and everyone too. And so obviously that's who's going to be taking care of your
It's a
family.
ladies' lunch with the funeral place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of restaurants over there.
What's there to eat around?
And also in the planning, and you mentioned the pastor you want to use and the music. So once that's all down in writing, do you contact the pastor?
So we will at the time of need. We'll be able to coordinate with the pastor or the church.
Okay.
Yes.
But they also have a pastor or a chaplain on staff.
Correct.
So if you don't have one, then you can use who they have.
Correct.
And same thing would go with the music too. Does Johnny Foster play over there?
Yep.
And so Bill Rory is the chaplain. He was our neighbor.
Oh, he's the sweetest man. Yeah, so he can help with everything if you don't have anyone.
He's out of jail.
I didn't know it was a jail. What's that announcement?
So I mean, if you don't have some of these people, then they provide that for you.
Well, that's good.
Most funeral homes would though. It's
I
not just
would imagine
yeah.
so. A good funeral home.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Bartender?
Bartender. Unfortunately, we don't do alcohol. But I can do the full party afterwards, right?
So another question I would be thinking, okay, so if any here do not have a final burial place in mind, and if they actually want to be buried and they don't have a place, do you have suggestions, or do you, when they come in to talk to you, do you say you need to find a place and then come back, or what?
So I can definitely make recommendations of just what families use in the area. We don't have one specific cemetery that we're associated with. You can choose whichever cemetery that you want to. But you would be setting up the cemetery portion directly with that cemetery. And I can obviously help give out contact information and whatnot there. But that brings up another question. If you are planning on being buried out of state, and that is something that we handle on a weekly basis. So that's also not uncommon if you want to be buried back or shipped back your urn to different
What
states.
about out of the country?
Out of the country, we do too. We work with a very large Kenyan population that all want to be buried back in Kenya. So, and that's a frequent flight that's done as well. So, I know. So obviously, probably no one here.
One last question. If you're cremated, and again, if you were hoping to be buried in your kid's backyard and plant a tree, that's okay with the law?
Yes.
Once you're cremated and you pick up the cremation, you can do whatever you want.
Is that okay with
And technically, obviously, there are laws that you're supposed to follow. Like I said, the ocean is 3 miles in the sea. If you're like at a national park, there's permits you can get.
Well, we have a neighbor down here that his we all know Dick, and his cousin died, and she was a big UGA fan, so he had her cremated, but obviously he could not take her urn and
to this day.
but he did put some of the ashes in an envelope, and as he went across the head, he said,
I didn't
they did, he did, but the rest of that, her ashes are buried and everything.
So the
Yeah,
big question here in Glynshyre is it against the HOA?
I don't think there's any guidelines on that.
I don't know what my ashes do.
Don't say anything, because they'll make them. So, I mean, I'm sure most of us think, this is our permanent home and everything, but what happens if your kids sell their house and
That's what I was asking.
Take the sign with you.
Put on a new tree.
they don't have to pull up the tree, do they?
Say bye, Dad.
Just put those
I
ashes
have a
too deep.
story.
You can dig them up and take them with you.
My dad, when I was about maybe 9, 10 years old, there were 12 of us. Wow.
12 kids?
12 kids.
Oh, 12 kids and 9 kids. Back
14 counting my mom and dad.
Wow.
And twice a month, there was a funeral parlor in Canada, and it was called Eugène Bourgie, that's French. And he bought 12 plots. And I remember when they used to come twice a month, my father would pay $2, $1, 75 cents, $2. And it came to $700.
For 12 plots?
Yes, well, I think there were 6 and 6. 6 burial and 6 for urns. And I still have that paperwork.
Oh my God.
But you know what? My family is scattered with husbands. And my mom and dad are buried there. And my brother Ashton and my sister Inez. That's it. I tell family that, there's spaces there. Oh, I'm not going to Canada, I'm going to be buried with George. And George is American and in different places. So it just sits there.
Don't you know a lot of people probably have that same problem? Parents think that they're trying to do the right thing and buy these plots for their family, and then they grow up and get married and they move, and there's a lot of empty
Tell
yes
what
there.
your brother-in-law's gonna do with the crystal.
No, that's not.
The last thing is with the
That wasn't
cremation
him.
thing, they have like, besides a plot, they have the little locker kind of.
Yeah, those are called niches. They above the ground structures, and they place the urn into.
And that's probably less expensive.
Those are actually normally more expensive than ground burial. But again, every cemetery, they have their different prices and everything.
Yeah.
And it's just like location with property. Your eye level ones are gonna be the most expensive. The ones way up there will be a little bit less expensive. So also interesting.
One of the things we did at my mother's funeral, she died of COVID in 2020, and we didn't have the celebration of life until 2021. But my sister typed out all these questions, and we put them in a hat, and everybody drew from that. And then it was things like, what was the funniest thing you remember about Virginia?
Aww.
We had the best
I think
time.
that's such a sweet idea.
Yeah, it was really a celebration because we were laughing and telling stories about mom. It was wonderful.
Aw, that's so sweet.
I'd like to do that for me.
Surely isn't.
Okay, any other questions? This is a great group. I know. Good job, everyone.
Well, if anybody has any other questions that they want to ask, Maddie one-on-one, she's right here. Or,
I'll leave
we
my card
can
out
make a
too.
plan to go up there if we want to. We can go see her one day.
Yeah, come visit me.
Thank you so much. And if I could give you my email address or
Yes, and I can email it to you.
Huge distillery.
I'll just write it on this.
Used to be Savers and Chandler's, so it's this huge international.
Where do you live at?
Lawrenceburg.
Okay.
Not far. Be careful along me.
Over here. Okay.
Yeah, we were from Bristol.
We were way up north.
Yeah.
We had a plot.
And I can totally vouch for this funeral. A lot of our stuff would have used it.
Good, how are you?
Oh, yeah, I think she's gone. His cruise. No, they probably are. Oh, really?
Just let them out all those little planes that they go.
I didn't think she was.